Greetings, Muttonistas. Every so often I get the urge to go abroad. Well, I get it quite a lot actually. And there are certain countries whose food I really adore, and I feel as if I haven't explored their country properly. So join me for this epic series where we're going to be travelling all around Turkey, and of course nowhere better to start than Istanbul, where our first vlog of this mutton tour is entitled The Kebabs of Istanbul. So in front of me is the Sezade, I think, Sag Kebab restaurant. It's a bit more than a hole in the wall, but it only really sells one thing, which is a horizontal style doner instead of a vertical one. Really popular with locals. I can hear people speaking Turkish, so let's go in and give it a whirl. And we're going to get this epic food tour off and rolling with what is a Sag Kebab, which is a vertical style doner, which I think is made out of lamb. Okay, the menu's been whipped in front of me immediately, and it's actually a tiny menu, but to be honest, when they have one solid product, what else do you need? So I'm going to have the Sag Kebab rather than the wrap, and something I've enjoyed outside Turkey before but hasn't been particularly spicy, esme, the spicy tomato dip. So in this series, just to give you a bit of background, I'm going to be travelling around Turkey, bringing you as many regional specialities as I can. Now, of course, Istanbul's a big melting pot and the biggest city in the country, so forgive me if some items are duplicated whilst I'm here. And whilst I'm waiting for the food to arrive, which I'm guessing isn't going to take very long, one thing that struck me is that the taxi drivers are as dishonest as they come here. The chap from the airport was fine, but I did take a photograph of the fares. Some of them are wanting very short journeys, virtually the same amount as I paid to go back from the airport, so be very careful with taxi drivers. In fact, I'm going to walk, and the waiter is telling me that I'm in for a bit of a treat here tonight. Okay, so the first dishes have arrived. We have the esme tomato dip, and as always, onions with sumac sprinkled on top. And sumac is something I really do love. I've just tried the tomato dip. I'll try it with an onion now. And it isn't actually particularly spicy. It's a little bit spicier than I've had in the UK and parts of Western Europe. But what I would say is that Turkish cuisine isn't supposed to be that spicy anyway. The kebab has promptly arrived, and wow, my mouth is salivating looking at this. Take a look, Muttonistas. Take a look. Now, whereas doner is usually ground and layered, this Sag Kebab is actually a bit more like a cross between a doner and a shawarma with fresh cut lamb. So, wrap it in bread. I'm not going to try it with the tomato paste at the moment because I want to see how it tastes on its own. Oh, lordy, lordy. I'm in kebab heaven, and I suspect I'm going to be for the next few weeks, and hopefully you will be too, Muttonistas. And now I'm going to try some with the tomato, the esme paste, and one of the onions with sumac. So as you saw on the menu, there was a choice of getting a wrap or having it served as a kebab, as I've had. I'd only go for the wrap if you were taking it away and eating it walking down the street. And I suppose this is a little street food shack. I was like a kid in a sweet shop coming here. Gosh, what goodies we have to look forward to, Muttonistas. And just to give you all a bit of background, this kebab comes from Erzurum in the northeast of Turkey. I don't think I'll be going there on this trip, so Istanbul is as good a place as any to get this. Anyway, Muttonistas, I'm going to polish this off, have an early night, and we will see you tomorrow for the next kebab. Right, Muttonistas, we're back again, and today we're on the other side of the water, but still on the European side of Istanbul in Karaköy. And as you can see, this is an area filled with trendy little bars, cafes, restaurants. However, Muttonistas, we are not here for that. As much as I do like it, we're here for a traditional stall that does one of the best examples of a very traditional Istanbul street food item. And to be honest, if you look here, there's a posh hotel, the Marriott. I'm a bit surprised, to be honest, that this area contains the item I'm looking for. Anyway, that queue probably is the stall I'm seeking. And what I'm trying to find is the famous Istanbul fish sandwich. I don't think you can call it a fish kebab, but let's call it a fish butty by the Bosphorus, shall we? Yep, this is my place. And the smell from here, whew, that is definitely mackerel. I can identify that smell anywhere. So as you can see, they're cooking the fish on a hot iron skillet, deboning it as much as they can. And again, something very important, it's a theme I've seen everywhere. The bread that they use does go on the same skillet so that the fish juices are incorporated into the bread. Salad is then added, a few peppers, the obligatory sumac and herbs, and a good squeeze of olive oil, and I think that might be balsamic. I'm really not sure what that black liquid is they put on at the end, and of course a bit of lemon juice. Now, they do claim that these sandwiches are completely boneless, and I've been watching him for a while. He does seem to be an absolute king of plucking bones out of fish. Slightly disconcerting they removed the skin, because I think the skin's got a lot of flavour. Wow, I mean, just in one swift manoeuvre, all the bones have gone. And notice here, he's putting the fish fillets to rest when he thinks they're cooked, because you wouldn't want this to be overcooked, because fish can lose moisture pretty swiftly. Now then, Muttonistas, they do have a couple of little tables inside, and given the number of people purchasing from here, I think I've actually lucked out a bit in getting a table. Anyway, you can get a double-sized one. I've just gone for a single one, and some of the vegetables they put in the end were pickles, so that'll add to the flavours in an interesting way. And surprisingly as well, they took cards here, although I used cash. You never really know in Istanbul where you stand. A lot of places do take cards, but some don't. So for me, I stick with cash because I still think cash is king here. Anyway, enough waffle, more eating. Quite exquisite, Muttonistas, quite exquisite. With the strong, oily, fishy taste of the mackerel, which almost has a bit of a smoked flavour, to be honest, after it's been on that skillet, along with the herbs and the sharpness of the pickles. What a beautiful contrast, such rich flavours, and to be honest, it's tempting to have more than one of these. But Muttonistas, if you'll excuse the pun, we have bigger fish to fry. So I'll get on with this and we'll move on for our next street food item. So a few things to note there. First of all, it wasn't completely boneless. I found a couple of small bones, but having said that, I'm pretty used to spitting them out. From the way I saw him deboning, I suspect you'd actually be a bit unlucky to find one with any bones in, but that's something you have to be careful of. The cost, well, next to nothing really. It was 60 Turkish liras, which is about slightly less than £3, slightly less than €3, and the water was like 50 pence or something, and something I wasn't able to film at the end. So a bit like how it happens with a kebab, I got a massive rush of juices. Now tell me where you get that from a fish sandwich. Well, I think I'm going to go back there again, but off camera. Anyway, onwards and upwards, because that was just a little appetizer, and now we'll have something a little more substantial. I do like Turkish and Arabian music, by the way, some very interesting instruments. I don't know if they're called ouds here as they are in Arabic or in Arabia, but those drums certainly do remind me of Arabic music. And you really do get a mixture of the old and the modern here in Istanbul. It is an incredible melting pot. Okay, Muttonistas, the traffic is horrendous at this time, people just going home from work, and the queues for the trams are even worse. Fortunately, I was able to find somewhere within walking distance to bring you our next item, kofta. Now, kofta is often confused in the UK with the long sticks of ground meat, which are sometimes called kubida in Iran and are called Adana kebabs here. But this is usually beef, and it's a meatball, not a long kebab. Now I'm at Hisco's in Karakoy. A bit of a speculative punt this is, but the reviews seem good, and if it's not very good, it just won't appear in the video. So let's go on and have a punt. No idea if they do a sandwich because I don't want a plateful, but I'll go in and ask. And here we have the little grill folks that the meatballs are laid to rest. Is it beef or lamb, the meatball? Which meat? Beef? Kofta is beef?
Yes.
Beef. So to clear it up, folks, it's beef and not lamb. I was asked about pepper, and as I mentioned to you in an earlier video, when it comes to spice, in Turkey the spice comes from fresh chilies, not from sauces. And one of those bad boys has been placed onto the barbecue. There we can see a tomato, a chili, some tomatoes, and 4 pieces of meatball. Now this is something I've had outside of Turkey before and on a Turkish aircraft. I've never had them fresh from the grill in Turkey, so I'm really looking forward to this.
You like spicy?
Yeah, I like spicy. Aha! Esme. And if you remember, folks, that's the spicy tomato paste that you see at many kebab shops in Istanbul. And that magic ingredient here, sumac.
This?
Yeah? So for those not familiar with them, those are little pickled chilies or pickled peppers. They're not that spicy, but a little bit of acidity doesn't harm. Yeah, I like it. So the whole sandwich has gone back in just to get the bread coated again with some meaty juices and to crisp it up a little bit. Et voila! Thank you. And there we have it, Muttonistas, 1 meatball sandwich. Now this looks more substantial than the fish sandwich I had about an hour ago, and I expect this to be the spiciest thing that I've had so far in Turkey. Again, it's a cuisine that's not particularly spicy, but can be. And of course, given the levels of spice I anticipate, I've paired this with my old favourite, the yoghurt drink they call ayran here. Here we go. Another taste sensation, that is. That meatball is so tender and juicy. The ones I had on aircraft were understandably a bit drier before, but this is definitely something you should try out, folks. I haven't got to the chili yet, but I'll keep you posted when I do. So the patron did just inform me that this establishment's been going for 70 years, and there is a picture of the gentleman's grandfather who established the place all those years ago on the wall. The meatballs themselves, he told me, it's pure meat. They don't thicken them out with bread, they don't put pepper or anything like that inside them. They're just quality meatballs with nothing added. The seasoning comes afterwards. And I did reach a chili, and for those of you scared about really hot chilies, there's a little heat, but they're not going to blow your head off. Anyway, I'm going to get on with this, and I'll see you Muttonistas when I'm done. Interesting map here, by the way, folks. Where the hell has Britain got to? Oh well. And for those of you who want a bit of culture, in front of us we have the Galata Kulesi Tower. And I think there is even a restaurant up there on the top floor. Okay, Muttonistas, that meatball sandwich was actually pretty big. It wasn't enormous, but it was enough to satisfy me. That and the fish sandwich hasn't left me bloated, but rather than absolutely stuffing myself, I'll bring you some more kebabs tomorrow. Before I finish eating today, and then moving on to tomorrow to complete the vlog, I'm going to take you somewhere for something a little sweet. Now, if you remember in my Pakistan series, we seem to be having halwa every other day. And it isn't a dessert that's limited to Pakistan or South Asia. It actually has its origins in the Middle East. So I'm going to try the Turkish variety and see how it shapes up. Helvasi Ali. I'm guessing helvasi means halwas. So they had 3 different flavours here, or 4 even. The original, the carrot, the pistachio, and something I didn't recognise. Now what surprised me is that something came out of the fridge and then the pistachio halwa was coated on top of it, and then what looked like crushed pistachio on top of that. So I'm not exactly sure what this is going to taste like, but let's dig in and find out. Okay, so that's interesting. The consistency of the topping, the halwa, is very similar to what I had in Pakistan, but it seems there's some cold cream underneath, which I didn't expect at all. I actually think I prefer this, without offending any of my friends in Pakistan, of course. And another thing it has in common, which I like, as though it is obviously sweet, it's not too sweet. There we can see it, the cream on the bottom. Is that ice cream? Is it cream? Is it halfway in between? I'd say it's halfway in between. Probably means it's some sort of ice cream. Well, that was a light and tasty end to the evening Muttonistas. I probably should have gone for the carrot because I could compare that more directly to the Pakistani halwa I had earlier in the year. Anyway, don't go away Muttonistas, more meaty treats on the way. And as if by magic, in a few ticks, night will have turned into day and it'll be kebab o'clock again. So Muttonistas, back again, time for more kebabs. But before we go on to the food, just a little bit of orientation here. The place I'm staying in, or the district I'm staying in, is Sultan Ahmet. It's close to the Blue Mosque and the Hagia Sophia, probably pronounced that incorrectly, but what I find here is that it is way too touristy, and when I see bars and restaurants lining the streets, as you can see behind me, full of international menus, sort of a generic menu, they all seem to be the same menus actually, which are badly overpriced, then for me it sets alarm bells ringing. I did actually eat at a couple of places here. The food was sort of okay, but as I said, overpriced, and I won't be bringing you any food reviews from this street. I think it's a massive tourist trap. Beer was about as expensive as I'm used to at home, so I would recommend avoiding this place unless you're so scared of going out into, shall I say, more traditional areas of Istanbul where there might be a language barrier. Doesn't bother me, and I don't think it should bother you either. I think staying in this area is being a bit too much in one's comfort zone. Okay, there is one plus, which is that there is like a visual overload of architecture around here. And of course, Muttonistas, it doesn't get more spectacular than the Hagia Sophia Mosque. Now, before we get to our first kebab of the day, Muttonistas, I've spotted a little street food item. And you know me, I can't resist when I see stuff like this. So, first up, we're going to try some roasted chestnuts. So this little stall is typical of what you'll find around Istanbul. Little street carts, boiling corn, and maybe they boil the chestnuts, or I guess they probably do unless they've got a flat iron plate there. Anyway, we're going to try some chestnuts. So that's what we've got. Peeling these one-handed's a bit difficult, but I'll give it a go. So, one peeled chestnut. So that was reasonably pleasant. I can't say I'm a massive nut fan, but it was all right. And if you are a nut man, you'll probably quite like these. And I have to say, Muttonistas, that's the first time I've eaten a whole chestnut on its own plain without it sort of being incorporated into some fancy dish at a restaurant. So it really is kebab o'clock now, Muttonistas. Let's go off in search of the Holy Grail. Okay, Muttonistas, we're back at the crease again, and I did say we were seeking the Holy Grail, and that Holy Grail is the famous mighty doner kebab. Now, I know a lot of vloggers have some sort of measuring competition to try and find the biggest spit and the most famous doner in Istanbul, but I'm going to have my doner at a typical street stall, which, having read the reviews, seems to be a decent place to go to. So let's give it a go. Might not be good, who knows, but my nose and my eyes tell me that it will be. Okay, so you get the choice between beef and chicken here. Of course, in the UK, it's between lamb and chicken, but this one looks particularly juicy and looks as if it's been carved regularly. Of course, pickles and various salad items are being added. I think it's actually mainly pickles. Wow, look at that bubbling away, folks. Oh, I do hope that's mine being carved there. So when I procure a kebab in the UK, I just look at how juicy the meat is and the spit. And this looked particularly juicy and a bit fatty, which I'm afraid is the way to go in these places. Tons more flavour. And for those who want to know how these things are made, I'm not sure how they're made in the UK because they're often mass produced, but here it's just layers upon layers upon layers of meat stacked up on top of each other, shaved off and trimmed, and then put back on the top of the kebab with plenty of fat to make sure it's going to be a juicy affair. So here we go. Is it going to be love at first bite? Indeed it is, indeed it is. Wow, meaty juices flowing around my mouth from the first bite. When you just bite into it, it oozes meat juices, and the pickles and the vegetables are a nice balance and contrast to the very, very strong flavour of the meat. Now, there are two such establishments opposite each other here. The one I didn't go to, the Neslihan buffet, and the one I did go to, the Mavi buffet. They had beef and chicken, but just a slightly lower turnover of customers at the one I didn't go to, the Neslihan, and the beef didn't look as if it was being carved very regularly. And the further down you get this kebab, Muttonistas, the juicier it gets and the better it gets. Wow, 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 what a doner kebab that was, and my eyes and nose did indeed take me to a great place. Now, I was only going to bring you one more item, but on my way to that doner establishment, I spotted somewhere a little bit interesting. Now, I was going to have a big doner, but I went for a small one, which may prove to be an error because it was that good. But something I passed on the way is a must-stop place. It's a dish I was going to feature in a later vlog in a restaurant, but I thought, well, I may as well try the hole-in-the-wall version. And, of course, those of you who watch me regularly know that there are two things that I really like: raw dishes and cold soups. Now, Muslim countries rarely have raw meat dishes, but Turkey is actually a bit of an exception. And the dish I'm going to try now is called shig kofta. I suspect this is beef, and I'm going to try the lamb version in a later vlog at a restaurant. Now, I was going to just pass this place up because I thought, well, I'm going to review this at a restaurant later on. But then I thought, well, hang on, there's a big queue of people. There always seems to be. I've passed it before, and there are women in the queue as well, not just taxi drivers with iron stomachs. I might add, I've just seen a child having some as well, so I reckon it's probably going to be pretty safe. And this is called the Uli Asta Sig Kofta. And I think some people are having it in a kind of lettuce-style wrap. I guess that's traditional. Okay, so the stall owner has just handed me a lettuce wrap of his sig kofta. Pretty good as well. A bit spicy, not massively so. I like the taste enough to buy a durum, like a wrap. Wow, this man can squeeze a lemon like a vice.
Abi sigarayı burada içme. Bak sigaranın külü buraya atmasın. Tamam. Gidin öbür tarafta için. Öyle boş çek.
Now I have to say, at first taste, I thought, well, that's really tasty, spicy, lemony, but not actually that meaty. And then I found out it's a vegetarian version, so I will be trying the meat version in a place that I've researched. But in the meantime, this ain't too bad either. And he added something that's very popular with food in this part of the world, pomegranate syrup. Hope it's not too sweet, but with the lemon and the spice, I don't think it'll feature that prominently. So as I keep eating this, the taste is actually becoming increasingly clear. I think nuts are actually the main ingredient. I said vegetarian, couldn't tell you whether it's vegan or not. Finally, Muttonistas, last item in this vlog, and it could well be the pièce de résistance. I know the doner was good, that little sig kofta was quite good. Quite a shock to me that it was vegetarian, but it was tasty. Now we are going to try the famous offal kebab called kokoreç, which I believe is lamb's intestines. And as you can see in the background, we have the lamb's intestines being slowly roasted or barbecued over charcoal. And I think it's all ground up and put on the hot iron skillet so it's fresh and hot. And then the bread is kept warm above the fried offal. And it wouldn't surprise me if the bread at some stage had been, shall we say, smeared in some of the fat. So there we are, there's the content of the sandwich going into the sandwich. Bit of herbs, salt, sumac as usual, and Bob's your uncle. So I can just about see here that once they cut off some of the grilled offal and it's pounded up, they actually put chilies and tomato into the mix that's being pounded together. So hopefully that means it's going to be a little spicy. And something very surprising, I wouldn't have expected to see mussels here. I understand that mussels, plain and stuffed, are quite popular here, and I'm going to try and introduce those on the next vlog if I can find a place that specialises in them. And the smell is absolutely mouth-watering. Now, for a lot of you, the smell of offals may be a bit rancid, but for those of you who love it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Wow, that's hot, rich and juicy and full of intestinal flavour. And I must admit, I'd had one of these before a couple of days ago, just, you know, for research purposes. And it was prepared slightly differently. In fact, the kebab, the offal kebab, was chopped up into small pieces after a bit was carved off and then served on bread, which was smeared with the juices of said kebab. Both preparations have left a very juicy and meaty piece of bread, but this is more like an unspiced katakat or takatak, which I had earlier this year in Pakistan. Obviously both delicious, but different in its own ways. And the one thing, of course, folks, that it has in common with every Turkish sandwich or kebab is that you get that rush of meaty juices right at the end as you're taking your last couple of bites. Always the best bit for me. So Muttonistas, what a pleasant meaty end to the day that was. Can't describe how much I enjoyed the doner and that offal kebab at the end. Now obviously there are as many kebabs in Turkey as there are cheeses in France, and I'll be bringing you plenty more kebabs in other vlogs, but there's no way I'm going to be able to bring you all of them. And just to put into perspective how big a rip off the area I'm staying in, the whole cost for the 3 items at the end was half what I paid for my main course yesterday. Okay, it'll always be more in a restaurant, but it shouldn't be that different. Anyway, plenty more content coming from Istanbul. Also coming your way, content from other parts of Turkey, which should be fascinating. These will be new places for me. Until the next one, though, I'm going to have to love you and leave you. Keep liking, keep sharing, keep subscribing, and most of all, don't forget, you can't beat a bit of mutton.